say you get a parking ticket and you can't pay it because you don't have the money to pay it. So you go on about your life. Then you get another parking ticket, right? Then they tow your car, and then they issue a bench warrant, right? Well, now they find you, the police or whatever find you. Let's say you jaywalk and you get stopped by a cop. You get put in jail until you can pay your fine, right? You can't pay your fine because you've lost your job. You didn't have money to begin with, so that first ticket messed you up. And now here's the other kicker. The public defenders are so overworked. I was watching last week tonight with John Oliver. In Louisiana in particular, the public defenders are so overworked. They have so many clients that the average amount of time they're allowed to see, they have time to see a client is about 4 to 5 minutes per
Sure.
client. So tell me how you're going to get the legal representation to help dig you out of the hole that you got put in because you parked on the wrong side of the street on a Tuesday when you're supposed to park on the other side from, Wednesday to Monday and between the hours of 4 and whatever time. Like, those weird like hours on the signs they have on the side of streets when they do the street cleaning. I used to get ticketed all the time for that because I just wasn't paying attention. But that's essentially what's happened here. If you cannot pay your court fees, you can't vote. And it's essentially what they call a debtor's prison. It's basically doing that. And debtor's prisons are illegal because it just stacks on top and you can't work your way out of it.
You know what else I found out
Mm,
doing work around police accountability and just social justice advocacy,
mm.
that slavery is illegal except for when you're in prison.
Again,
Yep.
Here is the
come
quote.
back to this.
It is in a lot of state constitutions, but it says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. That is in a lot of constitutions still, which means that that's why they can pay them less than minimum wage.
1 in 19 African Americans of voting age is disenfranchised. That's 3.5 times higher than their non-African American counterparts. And I very specifically picked this picture because it immediately, most people looking at this would not say, such a cute boy selling water. Because you don't typically look at
Water?
well, you don't typically look at
Yeah,
black kids
water?
as being black kids. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, those are water bottles. It's like a little, they're like a little like entrepreneurial group.
That's
Um,
so cute. How sweet. You're right, though. That was not the first thing that popped up into my mind, is what was in their hands. Even
Also,
me, honestly, it wasn't.
you know what? And this is where I want to say you are responsible for your second thought and your first action. If your first thought was, oh, what are they doing? That is your conditioning. If your second thought was, is that water? That's you, right? Like if you see somebody wearing a dress and you think it's ugly and you're like, oh, that's an ugly dress. That's your conditioning. Your second thought is, she looks like she feels really good about herself. That's who you are. That's your core. So if your first thought was like, take it easy on yourself, give yourself some grace, because we've all been conditioned to think the worst. Next one. This one in 10 African American adults is disenfranchised in 7 states: Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Kentucky, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Virginia. Yikes. For my Latinx folks, at least 506,000 Latin Americans voting eligible age are disenfranchised from voting. That is enough to sway an election. 500,000 votes is more than enough to sway an election. And then 1 million women. That's a fifth. That's a fifth of this population are disenfranchised from voting. These are the women who would probably vote for stronger maternity leave policies or put people in office who believe in and aligned with those things. Most of, before I misspeak, oftentimes women who are incarcerated are the breadwinners of their household. And a lot of times these women work low paying jobs, right? These are the women who would vote for a livable wage, a livable minimum wage. That's who these folks are. If their vote was not so powerful, the system would not work so hard to keep them out of the voting booths. It just wouldn't happen. And so I want you to, as we're talking about this in our communities, and you go back and you start talking to your friends about this, keep that in mind, right? Like this system is designed to push people out and make it scary and hard to access, because if we can access it, we can make changes. We can absolutely make changes. And you've seen some of that in like some of the progressive work that's being done in other places. And so just like, I know, like I said, I'm gonna bring you down, but we're gonna come back up together. We'll come back up together. So why? Why? So why the
Can
barriers?
I just speak to that point of making change, though?
Please.
That I truly do believe that there is power in the work that we do, right? It's
Mhm,
hard work. Um, to borrow a phrase, but it's good work, right? And the reason why I
mhm,
say that is because Stand Up Alaska and Alaska Take a Stand belong to a national coalition that we do a lot of work with called Center for Popular Democracy.
mhm,
And one of the things that we identified last year is something that we wanted to work on as a coalition. I think there's 38 partners in throughout the 50 states at least. And one of the things that we started to work on and said was a priority on a national scale, this was, 12 to 18 months ago, was housing. What do you see at the center of the campaign for the person running for the president of the United States today? It's housing.
housing.
We helped put that on the national agenda because of the rallies we did and the
Mhm,
advocacy we did and the pushing that we did and the yelling that we did as an organization, but not just as an organization, as a coalition. And that's why, to me, it's so important to become part of a coalition because it's only together that we make that kind of change, right? You don't
mhm,
make that kind of change by yourself. But with a little bit of knowledge and quite a few people that are pushing on the same oar as you, we can get housing into the national conversation, which means we can get to those solutions for housing that is needed across every community that I know of. Housing prices are ridiculous. And rural Alaska, too, right? Like housing is an issue from the inner city to the most rural of Alaskan villages. And so, if we can get the national focus on it, we can get that federal funding, which will roll down to the state, which will eventually roll down to those locales that really need it. And it's going to take all of us to push. And the harder we push, the faster that money is going to come downstream and help folks all across the board. And that's why it's so important that we do this work and that we get a little bit of education about the history of where we're at so we know where we're going.